like that deuce out there. Quads. 8 quads.
Nothing less than quads. But it's also part of the game is determining how you make money when you check. How to generate EV through checking, right? Can we induce our opponent to bet stronger hands? Are there situations where we're sort of incentivized to let our opponent catch up? You know, fast playing is important, but so is checking. And not just checking very strong hands, but knowing when to check sort of middling hands or when to check very weak hands. You know, that is part of optimum winning strategy, and it's worth learning how that can add EV to your game.
Here's an interesting situation after Patrick, understandably raising with the 2 jiggities. Colin flops the world with Queen 8 suited, flopping trips. And now he's got a $5,000 stack, and let's see if we can milk a little more out of Patrick.
So Patrick limp calls pre-flop and then goes for the raise on this board.
Basically click it to 900.
Now the click is an interesting decision because when you limp call, right, you imagine you're going to have a fairly wide range. So you're going to have a lot of hands like 7s, 6s, you know, ace deuce, maybe those middling type hands. But you're not necessarily going to want to raise those at this stack depth. And so when you raise on a board like this, what you're saying is you basically have, you know, 8s or, you know, an 8 or some kind of flush draw. And if I'm in Patrick's shoes now, I begin to sit here and think, okay, my opponent limped pre-flop, called my raise, check raised me on the flop, and now is jamming this turn. And that's going to affect basically the sort of hands that he's going to have in this situation. You know, how do I think Colin is playing? You know, what do I think his raise on the flop means? If I called on the flop with a hand like pocket jacks and he goes ahead and calls.
Biggest pot of the night so far, 11,000.
Looks like it.
8 quads.
And Colin finds the last 8 in the deck.
Pretty nice situation for Colin there, getting the full double, $11,000 pot. Flopping trips with Queen 8 suited, Bink City.
And Danny going to open the cutoff here with the 9-8 suited and OFC on the button. 3-betting the queens.
Getting at it a fold of 2 8s, and Patrick in the game for 10 or 15,000. 2 kings, facing a 3-bet. Not wasting any time, putting 4 of them in there.
And I like this 3-bet sizing. Again, you don't need to go really huge with a 4-bet. Oftentimes, even 3x is going to be, I don't want to say overkill, but I'd say more than you need. And here he goes a little under 3x, which I like being out of position. Now OFC thinking here with the queens. There is a lot to think about, right? Because there's times when you're facing a 4-bet. Might seem a very natural continue with queens, but let's say you have an opponent who, you know, they don't really 4-bet much, and you think they've only got aces, kings, and ace-king. Now queens is, you know, looking a bit less friendly, but if there's someone who they're going to be betting hands like ace-queen suited or ace-queen off, ace-jack suited, pocket jacks, pocket tens, now queens is a hand that you're kind of compelled to continue with. OC decides too soon to give up on the queens. He's going to call, which I like that decision. I don't really want a 5-bet here with pocket queens. You know, then we're taking a very strong, tight range and strengthening even further.
Oh man, this could 7K effective, and kings versus queens on a 6-4-3. Excuse me, board.
Patrick goes for the check, which is certainly a valid choice with kings here. When you look at these 4-bet spots, we were talking about solvers a bit earlier, right? We're about 200 big blinds deep in a 4-bet pot. The 4-better's out of position. You're not necessarily going to always see someone see the 4-better bet this. Oftentimes, you know, you see hands like aces, kings, queens, jacks, ace king suited, ace queen suited, ace king, king queen suited. Those hands are going to check sometimes. And to the extent that you check a hand like kings, you could definitely consider check raising it.
Which would look super strong.
It would look super strong, but you would want to balance it, obviously, with, you know, if I'm in Patrick's shoes, I would consider check raising a hand like ace-king, something that blocks the best hands that my opponent could have and generally has equity against them. He decides to go for the check call.
4-liner to a straight, 8,400 in the middle.
4-liner to a straight. In general, I think this this board is going to favor, OFC is going to have more combinations of the nuts on this board, I would say. Usually, you would see sometimes, a 3-bet would go in with a hand like pocket 7s or 7-6 or 8-7. But you're not often going to see a 4-bet go in with that.
What is that? 8, 6,
But that's going to be
7,
such a small part of OFC's range that it doesn't as much weigh on the strategy. Here, Patrick, I think, is going to weigh his decision between jamming or checking.
Yeah, stack size is relatively shallow, and he does check.
Goes for a check, which is maybe something, obviously if OFC finds a check here, Patrick's going to be kicking himself for. But what you really want when you're checking here is you should ask yourself how often is your opponent going to bet, right? And so now you're looking at hands that OFC has, if he has queens, is he going to decide to try and get value out of a hand like ace-king, right? Or out of a hand like jacks? If I'm sitting here in OFC's situation, I'm probably pretty persuaded that queens are good, and I might look to go for some value. But
3,000.
Well, he does induce a bet. This is nice result from Patrick.
And now
You got jacks?
Patrick just goes for the call.
That's what I was confused. I'm like, ah,
This is a spot where
kings.
Patrick
Almost
just
checked it,
played this
almost
hand
checked
about
I
as
was
good
like,
as you could
Jack's
have,
the
I
king,
think,
Jack's
to
the
get the
king. I'm
max.
like, no, it has to be
$14,000 pot, biggest one of the night after getting felted earlier.
But he does have a habit of wriggling out of some tough spots. Danny is he's a very canny player.
Smart thinking guy, looking down the 2 jacks in the cutoff. Then you got OFC right on your left with the queen 9 ball.
Speaking of VPIP,
That's right. Beep with the ducks. He's interested.
Patrick going to come along with the 10-9 off.
Getting
Habib
a-
duck
getting a
hunting here.
price. That's right. You
And
don't-
he finds the duck,
You don't say. Habib has been running pure.
but I have some bad news for him.
What's
His
that?
3 of a kind might not cut the mustard against
Oh,
Danny's.
Danny's top set of jiggities and OFC with a straight draw. Patrick's got an open ender. This is very ideal for Danny's situation. He's facing a bet and then a raise. He's sitting there with the nuts.
And here Danny has a very interesting choice, right? Because I think Danny has a comprehensive enough understanding of the game to know that he's going to be checking a lot of hands here. Even overpairs, right? Might want to check here. And now that he faces a check raise, he has to start thinking about how is Habib composing his check raising range. Does Danny think that it has a lot of, is it wide and it has a lot of bluffs, or is it very tight and has a lot of value hands? And if he thinks it's the latter, then he may decide to fast play this, as he does. And I think Danny determines pretty correctly that a lot of hands that Habib is check raising with, he's ready to go with.
Top
so-
set versus the bottom set of Habib and drawing dead, it seems. And there must be a dead deuce out there in quads.
And Danny continuing to only play premium hands, nothing
right.
less than quads.
Aces and jacks this man plays and is scooping the biggest pot of the night, 15,300.
We don't play with low V-pips. These guys are blasting away nonstop. 2 different worlds.
Patrick will raise the ace-king and the hijack, and he'll have a number of hangers on.
Could I have a hand?
Yeah, it's fun to go to the Cheen every once in a while, but in terms of like Wednesday night,
I never got
and you could
that.
find 30 tables of poker 10 minutes down the road. I just don't know. The juice is not worth the squeeze to me to go up there unless there's like a tournament series or something going on.
Oh, absolutely. And Hayden hits pay dirt out of position. Middle set with the pocket
This
sixes.
is nice for Hayden.
And Habib, unlikely to collect a bounty with his 7-deuce off in this game, but he does flop an open-ender and decides that's good enough to send
with
it.
the open ender. Hayden calls, $8,700 pot. Set versus straight draw. Jack of clubs safe. 10 of spades safe. Hayden, excuse me, I'm losing my mind, is going to win $4,600.
Yeah, Satan flopping the 3 sixes. 6, 6, 6. As OFC finding the kings now.
I'm a big fan of Ryan DePaulo's, which he can be a little crass sometimes, but his is another one of those that has found a way to be uniquely entertaining while sprinkling in some strategery here every once in a while, but he's legitimately funny to me, and his stuff is always an absolute like train wreck, but in a funny way.
Absolutely. And here's another situation we see OFC 3-betting out of position and getting the ace-high flop, ace 9-3. Kings is going to be a pretty obvious check. Not much benefit in betting, especially when your opponent can have plenty of ace-x. And in fact, you might actually want to be more inclined to bet a hand like pocket tens than pocket kings here, because then you can start to deny equity from overcards that might come to your tens. King's a pretty natural check on the flop, and OFC probably a bit relieved to see the ace here after the check back by Izzy on the flop. The check combined with the ace on the turn make it a lot less likely that Izzy's going to have a hand that beats pocket kings. And so it seems like Sean feels fairly comfortable betting here. I like the fact that he went for a slightly smaller size. You don't necessarily want to go large, because otherwise if Izzy is checking back, you know, some ace-x hands, as he should be here, now he's just going to be able to very comfortably continue with them. And the heart rolls off on the river. Maybe not intensely relevant, considering that after the check on the flop, the ranges are going to be a bit wider than if OFC had decided to start betting immediately, or if Izzy had decided to start betting immediately. And so there's still going to be plenty of one-pair hands or ace-x hands. It's not a given that either player has a flush the way that the hand is played out. But Izzy now sitting here versus the check on the river, deciding whether or not he can go for a value bet with his trip aces.
5,000.
5,000. Oh.
And
5,000
Izzy,
instant call? Is that what he said?
that is absolutely what happens here.
Whew, nice sizing from Izzy to get a pretty positive result. 14K pot. Izzy, king 8 on the button. Instant call from Carlos. 10-8 suited. Heads up, 8s, and it comes to 10. Carlos. A glimmer of hope for his otherwise quiet night. Flopping top pair. Izzy, backdoor hearts.
Bet 300.
3/4 pot.
And I do in general like this from Izzy, having the overcard and the backdoor flush draw. This is going to be a good situation for him. Again, you don't want to always bet your air, but if you're going to have a hand like king 8 off, which I think is valid opening from the button, this is a board that you can consider c-betting with.
Check.
Now when the deuce rolls off on the turn again, it's you aren't going to see as much deuce X from Carlos calling under the gun. So this isn't quite the same as, say, the 10 pairing, or say it was like a 10-9 deuce flop and it pairs a 9 on the turn. This isn't going to change the ranges all that much. But what it does do is it means that, you know, Izzy's air is going to remain mostly air, and so Carlos can again continue, especially turning the spade draw.
This, oh, he drills the flush. Excuse me. I thought Izzy sucked out, but Carlos with a 10-high flush.
And I like to see Carlos continue checking here. There's no reason to bet. You would let a lot of Izzy's bluffs, you know, missed hearts or other such things off the hook a bit too easily. And you actually, you know, I like this bet here from Izzy with the king. Top pair is often going to be very good. You're going to see a preponderance of like 10x hands from Carlos, and not all of them are going to be king 10. Not all of them are going to be 10x of spades. And so this in general is going to be a very good card for Izzy when the king comes on the river and the backdoor flush comes in.
Instant call, full double for Carlos.
And nice hand from Carlos.
Nice hand.
$10,000 pot just like that, and